In this segment, I'll review some concepts behind communicating with international or multicultural audiences. As with many of the concepts in this course, entire books have been written on them, but my goal here is to give you an overview of some important considerations. Your goals are to understand the importance of culture, ethnicity, and religious beliefs in patient care, understand the cultural biases inherent in our assumptions and practices, identify and manage cross-cultural ethical dilemmas. Culture is defined as the beliefs, customs, arts, etc. of a particular society, group, place, or time. In other words, culture helps us to provide people with the worldview that gives meaning to their personal and collective experiences through shared social institutions, beliefs, and values. Whether we realize it or not, culture influences every single aspect of our communications. It provides guidance on how to show politeness and respect, how much information to give, how to motivate people, when, how much, and how loudly to talk or even laugh. All our values and beliefs are shaped by culture, even those in medicine, science, and research, which we think of as objective. Even in objective fields, we still have to communicate with others, and how we do that is heavily influenced by culture. Now, this doesn't mean that you must learn in depth about the cultures of people you interact with. It does require you to understand that the values, beliefs, and practices of your patients or colleagues may be different from your own. Acknowledging, internalizing, and conducting yourself based on that understanding is called cultural sensitivity. How do cultures develop? Recall the definition refers to beliefs of a particular group or society in a particular place or time. This tells us that cultures can change or evolve, or they may cease to exist altogether. For instance, in Central America, the Mayan peoples practiced human sacrifices, something their descendants would not consider normal today. In medieval Europe, there was no such thing as separation of church and state, and the Inquisitions severely punished or killed those who were considered heretics. In different parts of the world, different groups or societies develop different beliefs. Thus, ethnicity may be defined as the feeling of group solidarity based on shared characteristics such as language, ancestry, shared history, and unique cultural traditions or symbols. Ethnic categories are statements about identity based on cultural or other shared features, as shown in the images here. At the same time, it's important to distinguish between culture and ethnicity. The lines between them are somewhat blurred, since a person's ethnic origin may give us cues to understanding his or her culture. At the same time, it's also important to avoid stereotyping. A person may have been born in a region that is associated with a particular culture or belief system, but that just doesn't mean that the individual person identifies or even associates with that culture. For example, a person born in the Middle East may come from an ethnic group associated with Muslim culture, but that person could very well be an atheist. Similarly, a person from a particular ethnic group may not conform to cultural norms associated with the group. Therefore, you should never assume that you understand a patient's beliefs simply based on his or her ethnic group or place of national origin. The person's cultural beliefs and values may affect healthcare decisions and practices, but you still need to ask and not rely on stereotyping. For instance, a person from the Middle East is not necessarily Arab or Muslim. A Jew is not necessarily a Zionist. An East Indian is not necessarily Hindu or Muslim. And yet, the cultural norms in which we were brought up still affect our thought processes. This is why cultural sensitivity and remaining aware of our potential biases is essential. Even when a patient's culture appears to be the same as yours, you cannot assume that's the case. Ask the patient about her or his values and beliefs in relation to a decision to ensure fully informed consent. The most effective route to cross-cultural sensitivity is to continuously reflect on the cultural values, beliefs, and practices of Western biomedicine, remembering that patients, parents, research subjects, and healthcare professionals may have values, beliefs, practices, or norms shaped by their respective cultures. So, in terms of informed consent, we cannot view risks and benefits independently of culture. Our culture shapes our understanding of the risks and benefits themselves. Ethical dilemmas may arise when culture appears to be affecting patients and their families' decisions about what is in the patient's best interests. For example, in Western cultures, we tend to value autonomy and the rights of the individual. In many Eastern cultures, people may make decisions based on the best interests of the collective community and have an authority figure representing that group to make a decision. How do we ethically handle this approach? In still others, the boundaries between the body and its surrounding social and spiritual environments are fluid. Therefore, a person may decline a life-saving treatment because of these beliefs, which would be mystifying to someone of a different culture. Where do we draw the line between accepting a cultural norm and declaring a person mentally incompetent for not wanting to save his or her life? There are no easy answers to these dilemmas, hence the name dilemmas. It's certainly outside the scope of this course to ponder all the philosophical approaches we could take, but it is important to be aware of their existence and think carefully about what you would do if you were placed in that situation. We'll turn our attention now to multicultural or international readers and medical writing. We'll begin by reviewing a few different cultural norms. As you can see in this table, some cultures are classified as high context, while others are low context. Again, we can't fit every person from a certain culture into these categories, but we can use them as a means of highlighting or heightening our cultural sensitivity. For instance, let's think about nonverbal communication. In the West, we value the concept of personal space, where people do not stand too closely to one another. In other cultures, this is perceived as unfriendly or even rude. Those of Northern European descent see eye contact as a sign of honesty, but in many cultures, dropped eyes are a sign of appropriate deference to a superior, and prolonged eye contact is considered rude. In certain Muslim countries, women and men who are not related by blood or marriage are not even supposed to make eye contact at all. And these kinds of differences can lead to miscommunication in a multicultural hospital or workplace setting. Supervisors may infer from their eye contact that employees are being disrespectful or trying to avoid them, when in fact the person is behaving appropriately according to the norms of his or her own culture. As you've probably realized by now, our values and beliefs affect our responses to people and situations, even when we don't mean them to. Most Americans and Canadians, for example, value fairness. "You're not playing fair" is a sharp criticism calling for changed behavior. In some countries, however, people expect certain groups to receive preferential treatment. Most North Americans think competition leads to better performance, while the Japanese believe that competition leads to disharmony. U.S. business people believe that success is based on individual achievement and is open to anyone who excels. Canadians prefer cooperation to such blatant competition. In England and in France, success is more obviously linked to social class. And in some countries, people of certain social classes or races are forbidden by law from participating fully in society. Many more North Americans value individualism. Other countries rely on group consensus for decision making, and we can see those effects throughout our lives. For instance, North American students are expected to complete their work assignments by themselves. If they get too much help from anyone else, it's considered cheating. But in Japan, groups work routinely together to solve problems. In North America, quiet is a sign that people are working, but in other parts of the world, people will talk to get work done. It seems very complicated and overwhelming, but there are ways to make it easier on yourself. The first step in understanding people of another culture is to realize that they may do things very differently and that they value their way just as much as you do yours. And people associated with a single culture differ, so don't try to memorize someone's cultural norms as a rigid set of rules. Instead, get a sense for the kinds of things that differ from one culture to another, and you can test these generalizations against your own experience. As always, when in doubt, just ask someone. For instance, when you're communicating through a language barrier, you need to use simple explanations. Now, this isn't the same as dumbing down, where you talk to someone as if he or she lacks intelligence. Instead, use simple terms to describe a medical issue, avoiding jargon. If you can't avoid jargon, then at least define it. Avoid humor. What may seem funny or clever in one culture may seem deeply offensive in another. And don't get lost in translation. All health communications that will be translated should be reviewed by professional medical interpreters who are familiar with the language and culture of the intended readers. If it's at all possible, write the material in the appropriate language in the first place, instead of writing it in English and then trying to translate it. As you may know from experience, online instant translation sites are not reliable. You can test this yourself if you like. Write a short paragraph, use an online site to translate the text, then take that translation and try to translate it back into English. It will make little to no sense at all. So use professionals. That's why they exist. Choose graphics and illustrations carefully and be sure that they will be understood by the target audience. Try to use visuals that are representative of the culture. For instance, colors may have different meanings. Red means caution in Western cultures, but in China, red is used for celebrations. Show the actions you want readers to take. If you show people in your visuals, try to include members of the same racial or ethnic group as your target audience. You can also use pictographs, which are useful for conveying instructions or procedures. Idioms or colloquialisms are not universally understood. Even if your readers speak English as their first language, they may be from another country and therefore unfamiliar with certain expressions. In the USA, for instance, surgery refers to an operation. In the UK, a surgery is a doctor's office. It's a lot to keep in mind, but again, being culturally sensitive doesn't mean you have to memorize every aspect of someone's culture, because they may not conform with that culture anyway, because they want to be different. And as always, many issues can be resolved if people simply speak to one another. And you can learn a lot about how a person views his or her culture by engaging in conversation.